How you doing, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I've been getting a lot of good comments regarding van life, and obviously I'm transitioning from, living and vlogging in Thailand to, New York or the Eastern Seaboard van life, which is a little bit of a rarity and maybe not too popular right now. So a question I got, or a comment that I got, because, I was going over the van build that I did, and I'll give a big shout out to Chris. He brought up the fact of why don't you install a partition / bulkhead. So now this is something I definitely was going to do, but the only problem is that when you throw out these ideas of an install, remember, and this is if you're going to proceed on coming up with your van build idea, don't just look at what the particular item costs. And this is also why van life is, the builders, there's so many of them now, is to install in the labor. Sometimes it's more than the item that you want to install. So let me explain. Talk about the bulkhead or the partition. What I was going to go with was something called a Ranger. Now, if you've ever seen an Amazon Prime truck, what you'll see if you ever walked in one is that they have an aluminum partition from Ranger, which is, I believe, a Canadian-based company. So now, I believe it's around $2,400 for the partition or bulkhead itself. Now, if you're not familiar with what a bulkhead is or a partition, I'll overlay one on the screen so you can kind of see what I mean. So obviously it's for protection. It could be for insulation. And obviously I'm trying to safeguard my vehicle because I'm based out of New York City, and I'm putting a van together at a time, especially if we talk about California on the other side, the West Coast, that people just do smash and grabs on people's cars. And it seems that nobody really cares, and it's just commonplace. So, how do you defend or prepare against something like that? So a partition was a direction that I was going to go in. So if we got $2,400 for the Ranger itself, probably plus shipping. So let's put it at $3,000 for the bulkhead. Now, another thing that I was going to do aesthetically is that I was going to sand it down and prime the interior part that would be facing the interior rear, where you're seeing in the bed over here. So it would be a nice rhino line look. It would be black. It would be tough. I mean, don't get me wrong. The aluminum is a good look, but once again, my artistic eye would say paint it. It's a better look. The problem is that when you want to put in a partition or bulkhead is that you have to now mount and balance it. So I'm going to throw up an email on the screen that, with my builder, who I thought was pretty fair regarding installation and the whole build process. Obviously there was some issues, but overall I thought everything got done well. So it was basically like $5,000 to mount and balance it, plus the $2,500 to $3,000. So you're looking at $8,000 for a sliding door partition. And also the other dilemma is that when you look at a 144 wheelbase, is that if you put a partition right behind me where these two seats are, it may also be that when it's situated, is that this chair and that chair, number one, you wouldn't be able to swivel it, but you may not have that much room to kind of push the seat backwards. So that's something to consider. So you're looking at $8,000 for a bulkhead or a partition. So obviously I deselected that from my build. Now, if we take a second poke at kind of safeguarding my vehicle, there's a product called Thunderbolt. So now if somebody, let's say the mentality is I lock the rear so nobody can enter. So now let's say they get in the windows or somehow they access the locks the factory locks, I was going to put in something called a thunderbolt, which is basically deadbolts that are integrated into certain parts of this vehicle. So now the deadbolt system is around $1,250, which seems reasonable. But the problem is, here we go once again with with installing this, you're looking at another $3,000. So I believe if we look at the email, you're going to see a number of $16,000 for the equipment plus labor and installation. So for a bulkhead, for the deadbolt system, and I believe there was something else that I was getting from Terrawag, and I don't even know what it is right now offhand, but you're looking at a $16,000 bump regarding, an addition to, trying to safeguard your van, or at least, deploy these items into your van build. So now let's also go into other things, because this is what this particular installment is about, is that if you want to add things to your build, what do they really cost at the end of the day? Let's talk about paint or paint jobs, and we're also going to talk about vinyl wraps and ceramics, or ceramic coating on your car. These are all estimates that I've got, and some of the stuff is on the car. So now, if you are somebody, because everyone's van build is really, basically customized to you, unless you're buying something off the shelf. So now if you're someone who's going to be driving around on these, off-grid campsites, and you're going to try to take this van where it's not necessarily supposed to go, is that I heavily recommend Line-Xing the whole entire vehicle. So now when you Line-X the whole vehicle, some of you, if you have, an understanding of how much that would cost you, the only reason I bring that out is that what's going to happen, and I can actually show you on my van, is that when they were transporting the van, it had some scratches on the flares that were wrapped, and also a little bit on the side of the car, because if there's overgrowth, either on the top or the bottom, those branches are going to scratch your car. And if you want to preserve your investment, I would say Line-X the whole vehicle on the outside. And if you're really insane and money is no object to you, then I also would Line-X the inside. So now if you're going to Line-X the outside of a vehicle, you're looking at, on the low end, anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000 just for the paint job. And the difference between Line-X and Rhino Liner is that Line-X goes on hot and the Rhino Liner goes on cold. And really why it becomes so expensive is that they have to take the car apart to basically paint it, and they have to prime it or sand it. So that's why these paint jobs cost so much money, but it is an option. And if I had to do it all over again, and if this was a 12-month vehicle that I was rolling around in, remember, I'm only in this van 5 months out of the year, I might have gone and got the crazy paint job. So now, if we're talking about paint, we got to talk about paint protection film and vinyl wraps. So now, this is a 144 wheelbase. How much did I get quoted on paint protection film regarding this whole vehicle? Or I think actually certain parts were going to be left out. So the quote that I got was around $8,800 to paint protect this vehicle. And I think they weren't going to do the nose of the vehicle. I don't remember offhand. So you have over $8,000. And when I was picking up my van in California, there was a Ford Transit that was basically in the lot, and I believe it had a color change. That was an $11,000 paint protection, film wrap job. So if you wanted to, take a gather on how much this costs for you and your van build, it's going to be 11 G's. So now if we dial it back to just Line-X or Rhino Liner, but I'm going to stay with Line-X because that's where I got my quotes from. The bumper, the side moldings, and also the rear bumper, and also the side view mirrors, through time, when the sun hits it, depending on your region, you'll notice that if you look at a Sprinter, it's always faded, because out of the factory, it's not really black, it's a gray color. So now when you see this, it doesn't really look too great. So what a lot of people endeavor on doing is that they line exit or rhino line it. So the quote that I got for line Xing the plastics, the bumper, and once again, they have to prep it, they have to take it off, was around $4,000 just for the plastics and the bumper. And unfortunately, I had a decline. And regarding wrapping the plastics, what has to happen is that this is another expensive endeavor. If you want to like do, you have like a camo print, I think it's called shadow something. And basically they have to remove it. They have to sand it. They have to prime it. Then they have to wrap it, which once again is also going to be super expensive. So when we talk about paints and we talk about, paint protection films, these things once again are going to run you, into the stratosphere. I mentioned there's something called ceramic coating of vehicle, like there's companies like Guion or Expel. I actually have ceramic coating on the vehicle. So what ceramic coating does is that it kind of bonds with the paint. So why it's a good idea, especially for a van, is that I cannot take this to a conventional car wash. I would have to get it hand washed, etc. So what it gives the ability to do, besides protecting your vehicle, is that you could basically spray wash it and the water would bead up and you'd be able to wipe it clean. It's very quick. It's very easy to do. But the price tag to ceramic coat a 144 wheelbase on a Sprinter, one of the quotes that I got, and it's the quote that I went with, was $2,200 to just ceramic coat the vehicle. So now that you have a little bit better of an understanding of some of the additions that you could, throw onto your vehicle, some were security based, some were aesthetic and protective. Like I said, as we go through this process of, understanding, your build and what you can put in the van, how much things actually cost. Because the reason I'm doing this is that I have the experience. I just built out, a van in the present with one of the leading companies that are out here. And just as we have another conversation, I got the itch to kind of do a 2.0. And if you heard the other videos, I want to throw solar up. And if you look, I did not put storage, like right above the flares or near the bed. So it was kind of bothering me a little bit. So I said, you know what? Let me price it out. Let me see what they say. So now the cabinets that I'm looking at are either going to be the Lost Highway aluminum, which are going to be more expensive than the Adventure Wagon mule bags, which is a soft good 2.0. So now when we look at either a $1,200 aluminum or a $500 bag, the quote that I got to install or burrowing into the brace kit was $18 for the install. And then, like I said, the components are the components. I thought $1,800 was like a ridiculous amount, to be honest. So obviously I'm not going to do that. The quote that I got for throwing up the solar panels was, as long as they're glued down or walkable solar, I didn't necessarily understand his terminology, but he was pretty clear in certain ways, is that it would be $900 for the install. They're going to burrow into the roof and connect it to the existing battery system. So you got $900 plus probably a walkable solar panel, depending on the watts, are anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 per panel if you want to throw them up on the roof. So I hope that this gives you a better idea regarding, labor install and also what some of these products might cost you when you end up in, a custom shop building out a van. So once again, consider subscribing to the channel. And, if this doesn't speak to you regarding van life and what I'm doing with this, there's a whole other portion of the channel that deals with Southeast Asia, and also another vector is I speak about longevity and performance enhancing medication. So coffee and juice, I'll talk to you soon and have a great day.